Hello everyone. Today we will begin a very long, very slow walk down a path you never intended to take. You might be sitting in the comfort of your room now. Perhaps a dim light is on, or maybe you've already turned everything off, preparing for the gentle pull of sleep. Good, because where we are going, the darkness is heavy, and the silence is a scream you can't quite hear yet. We are headed toward a very old, very forgotten place. A small stone building tucked away in a valley that history simply passed by. We are headed to the terrifying inn, where a widow's vengeance never fades. Imagine the feeling now, a chill that doesn't come from the air, but from the inside. The car has been parked, the engine is cold, and as you step out, the only sound is the gravel crunching beneath your boots, a sound too loud in this silence. The night air here is heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and something indefinable, something metallic and old, like forgotten iron. You look up at the inn. It's not grand. It's 2 stories of dark, unyielding stone, with a slate roof that seems to hunch under the weight of the years. The windows are sparse, and most of them are absolutely black, reflecting nothing of the faint moonlight. There is no welcoming glow, no friendly light spilling onto the road. Just a single, weak lantern hanging crookedly near the narrow wooden door, casting shadows that seem to twitch and multiply with every minute you stand there. This building is not empty, but it is silent. A silence so profound it feels like a pressure on your eardrums. It suggests that whatever is happening inside is either entirely still or moving so slowly, so deliberately, that it produces no noise you can interpret as normal. You reach the door. It's heavy oak, scarred by weather and time. You raise your hand to knock, but you hesitate. There is a small brass plate next to the door, tarnished green with age, and you lean close to read the barely visible, engraved script, "The Silent Watcher." It's a strange name for an inn, isn't it? A name that suggests not comfort or rest, but observation and permanence. With a deep breath, you push the door open. It doesn't creak, it sighs. A low, drawn-out groan of old wood against stone. Inside, the air is instantly colder, damper. It's a biting, unwelcome cold that seems to bypass your coat and settle directly into your bones. The lobby is small, dominated by a large, dark wooden counter. Behind it, the wall is lined with old wooden key hooks. The strange thing, they are all empty. Every single hook, save one, which holds a single, very large, iron key tagged with a tarnished brass 4. The counter is dusty, and on top of it, the only thing of note is a single, tall, slender candlestick, its wick unlit, casting a long shadow from the lantern outside. No register, no sign of life, just this overwhelming stillness. This is the first unsettling detail, the utter, total absence of anyone to greet you. This immediate emptiness should send you straight back out to your car. But something, curiosity, perhaps, or the strange, heavy hypnosis of the place, keeps you rooted there. Your eyes scanning the dark space. You notice the staircase to the left, a steep flight of wood that vanishes into the blackness above. It seems to promise not rest, but the ascent into something forgotten and perhaps forbidden. And speaking of forbidden, before we begin, I hope you can take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell if my video brings you something truly interesting. It helps us find others who enjoy this kind of cold, slow, historical dread. Also, tell me where you are listening from and what the local time is now. I always like to see how far apart we are sharing this quiet, chilling moment. It's quiet. And now, let's begin this journey together. You find yourself drawn to the key, the only key. A chill runs down your spine, a true horror event from a story you once read about a small village in the Alps, where travelers who took the only available room were never seen again. Their disappearance simply filed under lost to the mountains. You feel that same sense of finality here, tied to that single key. You tentatively reach out, your fingers brushing the cold, rough metal. You take the key. It feels heavy, much heavier than it should, as if it carries the weight of the entire building's history. It's marked 4. Room number 4. You look toward the staircase, and you have the distinct, terrifying feeling that the room is waiting for you, and not in a hospitable way. You decide to climb. With each upward step, the wood groans under your weight, a sound that seems to echo and linger far too long in the narrow stairwell. The heavy key to room 4 feels like a lead weight in your palm as you ascend the stairs. The landing is just as dark as the foyer below. The air here is stale, carrying the faint scent of dust, old wood, and maybe, just maybe, something that once lived here and should no longer be. You move along the corridor, counting the doors, 1, 2, 3, and finally, the heavy, uninviting door, marked with a chipped, dark 4. As you approach, you notice something immediately. Unlike the other doors, which are simply dark wood, this door has a small, brass knocker, shaped like the head of an ancient, frowning woman, but it's a very strange, almost ceremonial detail. You insert the key, oog, the mechanism turning with a grinding protest. Remember the sigh of the main door. This lock offers a similar, unhappy resistance. Pushing the door open reveals a room that is shockingly simple, almost ascetic. A small bed covered by a thick, dark quilt, a simple wooden chest of drawers, and a single heavy armchair near the window. But your eyes are drawn immediately to the wall opposite the bed. There, dominating the space, is a large, framed oil portrait. This is the unsettling portrait of the former owner, the widow. It's a somber 18th century piece, dark and meticulously detailed. The woman in the portrait is dressed in black lace, her posture rigid, her face pale. She is not conventionally beautiful. She is severe. But it's the eyes that capture you. They are painted with such cold, hard realism that they seem to follow your movement. They are wide, deep pools of brown, completely devoid of warmth, fixed not on you, but somewhere slightly past you, observing something terrible that you have yet to see. They are unsettlingly judgmental, almost angry. You move to the right, and the illusion of movement is so strong that you instinctively take a step back, feeling the immediate, sharp chill of a presence that has been watching from this spot for centuries. You quickly place your worn bag on the floor and turn back to the portrait. You try to tell yourself it's just the artist's technique, a trick of the light and shadow. Yet, you feel a deep, instinctive aversion to turning your back on her. You decide to avoid looking at the portrait and focus instead on the room's atmosphere, the oppressive silence. The silence here is not the absence of sound, it's the presence of silence. It feels engineered, suffocating. You could drop a pin, and the resulting sound would feel scandalous, a brutal violation of the room's solemn vow of quietude. You check the chest of drawers. They are empty, save for a thin layer of dust. You try the window. It is heavy, stuck fast, and refusing to open, only reinforcing your sense of enclosure. You feel a strange urge to laugh if you hear the bell now. Don't blame me, I already warned you. But the laughter catches in your throat, thin and nervous, as you settle into the heavy armchair. The silence begins to break. It's not a loud, sudden noise, but something far worse. The faint, repetitive sounds within the walls. It is a true horror event, a deeply chilling detail that many old stories share, like the famous case of the forgotten prisoner in the Tower of London, who scratched desperately at the stone walls until his fingers bled, the sound echoing only after his death. Here, the sound is softer, more rhythmic. You hear a faint, scraping sound, low and constant, coming from the wall behind the portrait. It is not frantic, it is slow, measured, like a fingernail tracing a groove. Over and over again, it is a sound that suggests endless, mindless repetition, the activity of something that has nothing but time. You lean your ear closer to the wall, right beside the wooden frame of the widow's gaze. The scraping pauses, complete silence. Then, you hear something else, much fainter, much more mysterious, a low, almost imperceptible clicking sound, like the turning of a tiny, ancient gear far inside the plaster and brick. It clicks twice, then stops. Is it a mouse? An insect? You try to rationally explain the sound away, but the cold stillness of the room fights your logic. The clock of the soul, some academics debated long ago, is what makes these faint sounds in haunted houses the residual energy of a life lived and ended, the heart's final. Small mechanical twitching. No one knows why these lingering noises always occur around the hour of 3 a.m., or why they seem to be trapped within the architecture itself. But the constant, soft scraping behind the portrait suggests a perpetual, hidden distress. You pull your ear away from the wall, the silence of the rest of the room feeling suddenly loud. You refuse to look at the portrait, but you feel intensely her cold, painted eyes watching your discomfort, your every move. You decide to unpack and go to bed. You tell yourself that tomorrow, in the light, the room will be just a room, and the portrait just a painting. You turn away from the widow, and the last thing you see before you crawl under the heavy quilt is the dark, silent wood of the door, and the immense, unblinking eyes of the widow in the corner of your vision. You are beneath the heavy, dark quilt now, trying to coax your body into rest, but your mind is wide awake, hyper-aware of the silence and the cold. The air in room 4 presses down on you, not physically, but psychologically. You close your eyes, and the unsettling eyes of the widow's portrait are still there, burned into your internal vision. You try to focus on the faint, rhythmic scraping behind the wall, using its gentle, maddening repetition as a strange form of counting sheep. You almost drift off. But then, the quiet scraping stops entirely, and a new sound begins. It is soft, and it comes from outside your window. It is the sound of heavy, deliberate movement, a shadow shifting. You know the window is old and stuck, yet you feel compelled to look. You slowly sit up, the movement causing the old bed springs to sigh softly in protest. You creep to the window, avoiding the sight of the portrait in the darkness. You peer through the dusty pane. The faint moonlight is just enough to silhouette the outline of a figure standing motionless, approximately 50 feet from the inn. It's too dark to make out features, but the shape is undeniably human, tall and still. It seems to be simply standing, facing the inn, facing your window. It is the night's first guest, yet it stands outside, unmoving, in the damp, cold night. A cold and a heavy shiver runs down your spine. A true horror event, reminiscent of those old 20th century ghost photos where an unexplained figure lurks just at the edge of the frame, patiently waiting for the camera's shutter. The figure gives off an aura of permanence, as if it has been standing in that exact spot for a long, long time. You hold your breath, your heart beginning to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against your ribs. You stare hard, and as you do, you realize the figure is not entirely silent. Faintly, carried on the damp air, you hear a sound so soft it's almost a figment of your imagination, a whispered, unintelligible song. It is a tune with no rhythm you can recognize, a continuous, low monotone that seems to have no beginning and no end. It is sung in a language you can't identify. Or perhaps it's just the raw sound of grief, filtered through a whisper, a mother's lost lament, or a spouse's unending sorrow. This is the mysterious detail of the part a song meant not for listening, but for haunting. You stay glued to the window, the cold of the glass seeping into your forehead. If you move, if you make a sound, perhaps the figure will notice. But what would it do? Then move closer. Enter the inn. The thought is paralyzing. You remember that little nervous joke? If you hear the bell now, don't blame me. I already warned you. But this is no joke. This is pure, cold dread. You notice something about the figure's posture. One arm seems to be held stiffly at its side, while the other is raised slightly, as if it were lightly touching its own chest. It is an odd, unnatural pose. This small observation is enough to break your fear and bring you back to the practical terror of your situation. You slowly back away from the window, keeping your eyes on the dark shape until the very last moment. You decide you need a light. You grope for the heavy key to room 4, the only thing you have that feels remotely grounding. As your hand closes around the cold metal, your eyes fall on the single detail that brings all the slow dread rushing into a sharp, painful climax, the true horror of room number 4. The key tag, you realize, is not just marked 4, it is marked 4, and beneath the number, etched finely into the old brass, is a single, small, almost invisible symbol, a tiny, withered rose. You had dismissed it as a decorative flourish. Now, in the sudden burst of clarity that often accompanies fear, You remember the legend of the unavenged dead across Europe, where a withered rose was often left at the door or on the grave of a victim of injustice, a sign that the spirit was not at rest, and that its memory was unfading. You look around the room again, seeing it now through the lens of that withered rose. The silence is not peaceful, it is a watch. The portrait is not just a painting, it is a sentinel. And the faint scraping sound in the wall is not a mouse. It is a continuous internal protest. You are not simply a guest in room 4. You are a captive of the room, marked by the key and observed by the silent watcher outside the window. The widow's vengeance, you realize with a sickening jolt, is not a fire that burns out. It is a cold that lasts forever. You retreat from the window, the image of the still figure and the whisper song etched into your mind. The little withered rose symbol on the key tag feels scalding cold against your skin. You are caught in room 4, marked as a participant in a vigil that should have ended centuries ago. The heavy silence returns, but now it is saturated with the promise of something finally happening. You need to understand what that withered rose means in the context of this inn, of the widow's vengeance. Driven by a fear that demands knowledge, you kneel by your bag. You search for anything, a small notepad, a water bottle, anything familiar to ground you. Instead, your hand brushes against a thin, brittle object tucked deep beneath the linen lining of the chest of drawers. It's a book. No, not a book, but a small leather-bound journal. It is so old the leather is cracked, and the edges of the paper are yellowed and fragile. It must have been forgotten here, hidden from view for decades. This is your strange, mysterious detail, an unexpected primary source of the inn's pain. You open it carefully. The script is faded cursive, dated somewhere in the late 1700s. It's written in a careful, elegant hand that is decidedly not the hand of the widow in the portrait, who looks like she would have preferred to etch her thoughts into stone. The journal is clearly written by a guest, perhaps a traveler who stayed here long ago. Most of the entries are mundane notes on road conditions and prices, but one entry, dated September 14th, is stained slightly. As if tears or coffee once fell upon it, you hold the journal close to the dim light filtering through the window, slowly deciphering the words. I stayed at the Watchers today. The air is foul. The proprietor, a man named Silas, is as cold and gray as the stones of his own walls. But his wife, she is worse than the stones. She carries a silence that is heavier than any man's burden. They speak of a great tragedy, a business gone wrong. And that man, Silas, took everything she held dear. They say she died of a broken heart, or perhaps something quicker. On the very floor below, he remarried within the year. No one speaks her name now. They fear him, and they fear the things that now move in the dark corners of the upper floor. They fear what remains of her spirit. The journal drops slightly in your hand. You have a name, Silas, and you have confirmation of the tragedy and the powerful, lingering spirit of the former wife, the widow. But most chillingly, you read the sentence again. No one speaks her name now. This brings us to a deep and fascinating yet incomprehensible academic debate. For centuries, scholars of folklore and occult history have argued about the power of a forgotten name. Some theories, debated intensely in hushed library corners, suggest that a wronged spirit whose name is consciously erased from memory by the living gains immense, undirected power. This power, they argue, transforms vengeance from a focused act of retribution into a cosmic curse, a true horror event that attaches itself to the place rather than the person. They buried her memory face down, so to speak, believing that if they didn't speak her name, they couldn't be haunted, but the opposite, as this inn suggests, is terrifyingly true. The lack of a name makes the vengeance limitless, a nameless cold that settles on every soul who crosses the threshold. You look up at the portrait of the nameless woman. Her eyes, those cold, judging voids, seem even darker now. Was her name, her very identity, taken from her as part of Silas's final cruelty? You carefully trace the lines of the entry again, desperate for more. The journal mentions that the tragedy happened on the very floor below. You realize this suggests a specific, contained spot, and the cold, heavy feeling you felt when you first entered the foyer suddenly makes perfect, horrifying sense. Remember the immense weight of the key to room 4? It's the key to a space that sits directly above the scene of the widow's death. You close the journal, your hands trembling. You are holding a piece of her story, a forgotten name, and a broken heart. You are no longer just a traveler. You are now the keeper of this dangerous, small secret. The quiet, repetitive scraping in the wall begins again, soft and persistent. And for the first time, you wonder if that sound isn't the restless scratching of a lost soul trying to write down her own forgotten name. It's the most chilling thought of all. The small journal, with its mention of Silas and the nameless widow's death on the floor below, rests heavily on the dusty bedside table. You look at the dark floorboards of room 4, and suddenly the space doesn't feel like a room anymore. It feels like a pressure point, a weight pressing down on the injustice that happened right beneath your feet. You know you should leave the room, but the oppressive cold and the chilling realization that the widow's vengeance is nameless, and therefore directed at anyone, compels you to look for answers within the inn's confines. You carefully descend the creaking, groaning staircase, clutching the iron key. The foyer below is exactly as you left it, dominated by the dusty counter and the unsettling silence. The single unlit candlestick seems to mock your desire for light. You feel the cold immediately, a more intense version of the chill in room 4 right here, on this main floor. Remember the journal mentioned the tragedy happened on the very floor below. You are standing on the stage of the forgotten crime. Your gaze travels across the empty space, searching for something Silas would have wanted to hide. It quickly lands on a narrow, almost invisible door set flush into the far wall, opposite the stairs. It is made of thick, dark wood, studded with ancient iron rivets. It looks less like a storage door and more like the entrance to a vault. You recognize the immediate, heavy dread that this is the place, the locked cellar. You move towards it slowly. The wood of the door is bitterly cold to the touch, almost wet. There is no handle, only a massive, rusted iron bolt that is thrown across the frame. It is secured by an old, heavy padlock, clearly from a bygone century. Its brass casing tarnished black, and its mechanism seized with rust. This detail is the strange, mysterious element of the excessive, almost paranoid effort put into keeping whatever is down there. As you lean close to the lock, trying to read any inscription, and you notice the smell. It's not the damp earth and old wood smell of the rest of the inn. This smell is different. A faint, sickeningly sweet. Metallic smell that reminds you instinctively of old copper and decay. It is the scent of blood and iron, old and dried, yet strangely potent in this stagnant air. It makes your head spin, and you take a sharp step back. You recall a true horror event that often happens in old buildings tied to great sadness, like the infamous plague houses of 17th century London, where the air itself was thought to be contaminated by lingering illness and fear. Here, the air near the cellar door seems to be contaminated by pure, concentrated dread. You look around the empty foyer, suddenly certain that the nameless widow is watching you from the darkest corner. You quickly check the iron bolt, giving it a tentative tug. It holds fast. The padlock, you realize, isn't meant to keep people out, it's meant to keep something in. This brings you to the chilling history of the inn's original purpose. You think about the name on the brass plate outside the Silent Watcher. It suggests not a place of rest, but a place of holding, of silent custody. Given the architecture, the thick stone, the heavy doors, the cellar, you realize this building might not have been built as a charming roadside inn at all. It may have been a former jail, a temporary holding cell, or perhaps even a place of forced quarantine during one of the great historical plagues. The basement, then, wasn't a place for wine storage, but for the containment of things society wanted to forget. This terrifying thought that the very structure you are standing in was designed to isolate and imprison gives you a sudden, sharp clarity. The cellar below, you realize, would have been the perfect place for a cruel man like Silas to dispose of the body, or even, more chillingly, to simply leave the dying widow to fade away slowly. The padlock is her final, silent, metallic tombstone. You shudder. A short, sharp sentence of pure fright escaping you. The smell is stronger now. You decide you cannot stay near this door. You back away, moving back toward the stairs. A small, cold laugh bubbles up if you hear the bell now. Don't blame me. I already warned you. You are halfway up the first step when you hear a soft, almost imperceptible tink from the far wall, a sound that suggests that the heavy iron bolt on the cellar door has just shifted infinitesimally, a movement too small to be natural, a response to your presence. You take the remaining steps, 2 at a time, desperate to be back in the oppressive but familiar silence of room 4. You are back in room 4, breathing heavily. The silence here now feeling less oppressive and more like a necessary shield against the metallic scent and the chilling shift of the bolt on the cellar door below. Your eyes involuntarily dart to the portrait of the nameless widow she is watching, always watching. A silent sentinel of the injustice that permeates the stone. The heavy iron key to room 4 still rests in your palm, cold and rough. You sit on the edge of the bed, the small leather journal lying open nearby, its words about Silas and the tragedy echoing in your mind. You feel an overwhelming urge to understand the pattern of this haunting, to find the physical connection to her endless sorrow. As you absent-mindedly run your fingers along the key, you notice a small dark object sitting tucked deep within the open seams of the old wooden floorboards, almost hidden by dust and shadow. It is so tiny, so insignificant, that it's a wonder you saw it at all. You kneel down and carefully extract it. It is a small, tarnished bell. It's brass, but heavily oxidized, blackened by age, and perhaps by damp. It has no clapper. Instead, a fine, almost invisible length of dark string is tied around its upper loop. This is the strange, mysterious detail of the part. Why would a bell be found here, in the recesses of the floor? And why would its sound-making mechanism be absent? You immediately recall a chilling, true horror event that pervades the lore of Northern Europe. Particularly in the 17th and 18th centuries, the local legend of the dead bell or the corpse bell. In certain superstitious villages, when a person died under suspicious or unjust circumstances, especially if their spirit was thought likely to return for vengeance, a small bell, often missing its clapper, would be tied to the deceased's wrist or ankle after they were buried. The attached string would lead up through the grave dirt to a hidden spot nearby. The purpose wasn't for the bell to ring, but for the living to check it. If the string was taut or the bell was slightly displaced, it was a terrifying sign that the injustice was so great that the dead person was tugging on the cord, actively trying to return and seek retribution. It was the physical tether of an unjust spirit. The small, tarnished bell in your hand is exactly this kind of artifact. You realize, with a sudden, sickening clarity, that this bell must be the widow's tether. It wasn't found in a grave, but it was hidden in the floorboards of the very room above the site of her death. It is the physical link to her long dead hand, a relic of Silas's or the villagers' fearful attempt to contain her growing rage without appeasing her. You hold the bell. It is incredibly cold. And then it happens, a climax of cold, slow terror. The bell, despite having no clapper, makes a sound. It's not a loud sound. It is a soft, high-pitched, almost imperceptible tinkling sound. It doesn't ring from within, but seems to resonate from the metal itself, as if microscopic vibrations in the atmosphere are causing the tarnished brass to hum a note of pure dread. It is the sound of the string, buried deep in the structure of the inn, being pulled softly, slowly, persistently, by something far beneath the floor. You drop the bell onto the quilt as if it were burning, your breath catching in your throat. You whisper a small, nervous joke to yourself. I already warned you about the bell, didn't I? Well, now you know I wasn't kidding. The tinkling stops instantly the moment it leaves your touch. Your heart pounds heavily. You are holding the physical manifestation of her vengeance, a tangible piece of her unending distress. The silence of the room seems to acknowledge this discovery. Becoming heavier, denser, you look at the dark corner of the room, and for a terrifying second, you think you see the black lace of the widow's dress dissolve back into the shadows. You know, without a doubt, that you have just made contact with the vengeful spirit of the nameless widow, and she knows you have her bell. The small, tarnished bell, the widow's dead bell, sits on the dark quilt, a chilling monument to her unavenged suffering. The soft, resonant tinkle it emitted still echoes in the suffocating silence of room 4. You know now that you possess the tether to her spirit, and this knowledge has made you the center of the vengeance she harbors for the entire inn. You need to know exactly where she died. The journal mentioned the floor below, and the oppressive cold was heaviest near the locked cellar door. But the vengeance feels focused, almost personal. Within this room, you get up, moving slowly, feeling the heavy gaze of the portrait on your back. You must find the mark of her suffering. You begin a meticulous, terrifying survey of the floorboards, kneeling down and running your fingers over the dusty, rough wood. The floor is old, uneven, and scarred by centuries of foot traffic and heavy furniture. You move towards the wall where the portrait hangs, the place where the faint, rhythmic scraping sound originates. You are looking for a break in the pattern, a sign that the floor has been disturbed. And then you find it, near the corner, half hidden beneath the dark skirting board, is a deep, raw scratch mark on the floor. It is not the scratch of a heavy trunk being dragged. It is a series of short, furious gouges, as if something sharp and brittle, perhaps a stone, or a broken piece of pottery, or even a fingernail, was raked repeatedly, with desperate force, across the wood. This is the strange, mysterious detail of the part. The mark is too low, too focused, and too visceral to be accidental. It speaks of a last, frantic effort. You run your fingers over the raw wood, and the cold that has pervaded the inn suddenly intensifies to an alarming degree. It is not just the room temperature dropping, it is a profound, concentrated deep cold that floods your hand and arm. A true horror event that chills you to your very core. It feels like plunging your hand into freezing water, only this cold seems to emanate from the wood itself. This sensation, you realize, is not from the building's old stones. It is the cold of death clinging to the surface, the physical echo of the widow's final hours. You snatch your hand back, a sharp, involuntary gasp escaping your lips. For a fleeting second, you could feel the desperation embedded in the gouges. The academic debate around the phenomenon of residual haunting often focuses on the idea that extreme emotional suffering, particularly injustice or betrayal, can leave an indelible physical imprint on the environment. The widow did not die quietly. She died fighting, marking the spot of her final, painful realization of Silas's cruelty. This mark is her signature of suffering. And this sudden, deep cold is the vengeance's mark she left for you to find. You glance nervously toward the portrait. It seems darker now, more resolved. You recall that nervous little joke about the bell if you hear the bell now. Don't blame me, I already warned you, but the bell is quiet, and the joke is entirely out of place. This is not playful, this is raw. Enduring pain, the mark on the floor, the intense cold, and the relentless silence form a terrifying truth. Room 4 is not just above her death site. It is part of it. The gouges are at the exact place where, centuries ago, her body might have been hidden, dragged, or simply left to grow cold while Silas prepared his next cruelty. You stand up slowly, your body trembling, a sharp sentence of fear cutting through your composure. The floor is alive with her pain. You realize that every time you walk across this room, every time the old floorboards groan, you are pressing down on the mark of her betrayal. You are a captive in a box built on pure, concentrated vengeance, and the nameless widow has just made a terrifying connection with you through the cold, permanent scratch on the wood. The profound, bone-deep cold you felt emanating from the vengeance's mark on the floor has left you shaken. You retreat to the heavy armchair, keeping your eyes on the dark wood and that single, scarred corner, the final resting place of the widow's physical despair. The portrait watches, the dead bell is silent on the quilt, and the scraping in the wall has turned low and rhythmic, almost a sigh of endless toil. Your attention shifts back to the small, leather-bound journal, the only friendly voice in this house of silent rage. You pick it up, flipping past the mundane travel notes, past the initial, fear-tinged entry. hoping for an insight that could explain the utter finality of the widow's situation. Tucked between the brittle pages, as thin and fragile as a moth's wing, you find a small, folded piece of paper. It is an old, unsent letter, the ink faded to a sepia tone, the edges crumbling. This is the strange, mysterious detail of the part. A fragment of raw communication, frozen in time. The handwriting is erratic, clearly penned in haste and under extreme duress. You slowly, meticulously begin to read the fragmented, desperate plea. To my sister, in the name of God and all that is merciful, do not come here. Silas has taken everything, even the small inheritance that was rightfully mine. He has locked the registry and refuses to allow me to leave. I fear he intends to let me perish here, isolated and forgotten. He speaks of a new wife, and he knows I carry the secret of his dishonest dealings. If you do not hear from me before the harvest moon, know that I am held in unjust darkness. Tell the magistrate about the papers. The marriage contract was clear. I was never meant to be a pauper, only a servant to his monstrous greed. Please, tell them my part was just. The letter abruptly ends, torn off just as the writer was making her final appeal. It's a chilling, first-hand testament to her imprisonment and the true horror event, her calculated, slow murder through isolation and deprivation, carried out by her own husband, Silas. This confirms that her vengeance is not merely the result of a sudden outburst, but the deep, cold fury of a soul deliberately broken and erased. The mention of the marriage contract instantly sparks a memory of a deep, yet incomprehensible academic debate you once read about in the dusty archives of legal history. Scholars have long argued about the draconian nature of 18th century European marriage contracts, particularly concerning dower rights and a woman's ability to retain property after marriage or separation. In many jurisdictions, a husband had complete, nearly untouchable control over his wife's assets and even her body. The debate centers on how often these seemingly legal contracts became instruments of slow-motion murder, giving men the legal right to starve, confine, or drive their wives to death without consequence. No one could agree on whether the law enabled the crime or merely failed to prevent it, but the chilling implication is that Silas's actions were not just morally monstrous, they were legally defensible in his mind. The marriage contract was her death warrant. You look at the unsent letter. This plea, never delivered, is the final proof of her unjust darkness. You fold the letter gently, a wave of profound sympathy washing over you, quickly followed by a sharp, cold realization by reading this letter. You have now assumed her failed mission. You are carrying her message of injustice. A small, nervous, almost inappropriate joke forms on your lips. Well, at least the post office can't lose this one now. You force a shaky, silent laugh. The room remains still, but the air feels colder, denser, as if the nameless widow, fueled by the confirmation of her betrayal, has just moved closer to you. You hear the rhythmic scraping in the wall pause again, and for a terrifying second, you imagine the woman in the portrait is no longer looking past you, but staring directly into your soul, acknowledging your new, frightening responsibility. The unsent letter, with its devastating testimony of Silas's cruelty and the legal trap of the marriage contract, has now implicated you completely in the widow's story. You are the only person in centuries to have read her final plea for justice. You tuck the fragile paper back into the journal, aware that you are holding not just history, but a very dangerous burden. The quiet of room 4 now feels like a shared secret, and the silent watcher in the portrait seems to approve. You are sitting very still, listening to the persistent low scraping sound from the wall behind the widow's portrait, the relentless sound of a restless soul. Suddenly, the scraping ceases, the air holds its breath. You hear it, a new sound, one that instantly electrifies the silence. It's faint, muffled, and entirely undeniable. The sound of dragging footsteps. They are not heavy, running steps. They are slow, laborious, and distinctly rhythmic. Coming from the hall outside your door, the pace is deliberate, and with each footfall, there is a terrible, soft scrape, as if a heavy, cloth-wrapped object is being dragged along the dusty wooden floor. This is the true horror event of the moment, the unmistakable indication of movement in an inn that should be utterly devoid of moving occupants. You freeze, your breath shallow. You listen intently, trying to place the sound. It is not coming up the stairs, but moving along the corridor, passing the other empty rooms, room 1, room 2, room 3, and heading directly toward room 4. The sound stops directly outside your heavy oak door. Silence returns, broken only by the frantic pounding of your own heart. The silence stretches, taut and unbearable, for what feels like an hour. Then you hear a small, chilling sound right at your eye level, a tiny, sharp click. Your eyes snap to the keyhole. The key, which you had removed and placed on the bedside table, is not in the lock. Yet, as you stare into the tiny, dark brass keyhole, the mysterious detail appears. You see a momentary, fleeting shadow briefly seen in the keyhole. It's not the shadow of an eye looking in, it's a longer, thinner shape, maybe an ancient, brittle finger, or perhaps a sharp, rusted tool being delicately inserted and then immediately withdrawn. It is a quick, probing movement, as if whatever is out there is merely confirming your presence. A terrifying moment of reconnaissance. The shadow vanishes, the silence returns. Only now it is laced with a palpable sense of hostile intelligence. You jump up from the chair, a sharp, involuntary movement. You are utterly alone, and yet you are being investigated. You back away from the door, your mind racing, and that little nervous, inappropriate thought bubbles up, a quiet, creepy joke to momentarily break the tension. Well, at least I know the cleaning staff is very thorough, checking the locks at this hour. If you hear the bell now, don't blame me. The dragging footsteps resume. They are moving away now, back down the corridor. The scrape fading slowly, too slowly, back towards the staircase. They do not descend the stairs, though. The sound simply fades, dissolving into the ancient, absorbing structure of the inn, leaving you with the absolute certainty that whatever was out there is still in the building, and it knows exactly where you are and what you possess. You look down at the dark, heavy iron key to room 4 resting on the table, and then up at the cold, unblinking eyes of the widow's portrait. You realize the figure outside the window, the faint scraping in the wall, and the dragging footsteps in the hall are all part of the same relentless, unhurried, and deeply vengeful entity. She is not in a hurry. She has all the time in the world. And now, she has found you. You are the audience to her enduring, terrifying monologue. The retreating sound of the dragging footsteps has left a chilling void in the corridor, confirming that the nameless widow's vengeance is a conscious, patrolling force. You are still frozen by the door, the fleeting image of that sharp object in the keyhole a cold, probing curiosity etched in your memory. You are no longer safe just because you are locked in. You turn your attention back to the silent, watchful portrait of the widow. Her eyes, which you've avoided out of superstitious dread, now feel like the key to the next secret. You approach the painting slowly. It is a work of dark, severe realism, capturing not just a woman, but a profound, unyielding sense of betrayal. You run a hesitant finger along the edge of the heavy wooden frame. It's an antique, clearly original to the inn. As your hand moves around the dark wood, you feel a slight, almost imperceptible gap, a seam in the wall near the corner. Behind the main portrait, this is the source of the faint, incessant scraping sound. With a sudden surge of nervous determination, you press lightly on the frame. It gives way slightly, revealing that the main portrait is hinged. You gently swing it outward, exposing the damp, dark stone wall behind. And there, recessed into the stone, is a small, perfectly preserved second portrait. This is the strange, mysterious detail of the part. It is a smaller painting, oval-shaped, depicting a stern, heavily set man in dark, respectable clothing. His face is pale, his lips thin and curled in a look of permanent disapproval. But the severity of his gaze is unmistakable. This must be Silas, the cruel proprietor, the man who unjustly claimed the widow's inheritance and condemned her to die in the walls of his own creation. The act of the widow having his portrait hidden behind hers, constantly listening to her silent protest, is a magnificent piece of quiet, enduring spite. But you notice a far more unsettling detail. Silas's eyes, like the widow's, are painted with a terrifying realism. However, his left eye is missing. It's not painted closed. The canvas where the eye should be is a small, ragged tear, a violent, intentional scratch that completely obliterates the pupil and iris. It looks like it was gouged out, perhaps with the very same tool that caused the vengeance's mark on the floor. This act of disfigurement, hidden behind the widow's silent face, is the true horror event, a private, ritualistic act of revenge carried out long ago, the visual equivalent of tearing his name from history. You feel a profound chill. You realize this is the physical focus of her vengeance. She is trapped here, but so is he, contained forever behind her image, silently enduring his perpetual, painted blinding. You hear a quiet, low sound, almost a sigh, directly in front of you. You look back at the main portrait. The widow's severe expression has not changed, but her painted lips seem, for a terrifying instant, to be curving into the slightest, most subtle smile. A small, nervous, self-deprecating joke surfaces. Well, at least I know the interior decorating decisions of the 18th century were driven by deep, abiding hate. If you hear the bell now, don't blame me. You quickly swing the widow's portrait back into place, sealing Silas back into his hidden, dark enclosure. The faint scraping sound resumes, but now it feels different, almost triumphant. The sound of the victorious sentinel, settling back in to watch over her eternal prisoner. You know that by discovering this hidden tableau, you have become even more entwined in her terrible, long-ago marriage. You are carrying her memory of both her plea and her final, satisfying act of spite, with Silas's mutilated portrait now safely hidden behind the triumphant gaze of the nameless widow. The silence in room 4 is heavier than ever. You know the truth. Now vengeance is not always loud. Sometimes it is just patient and meticulous. The two portraits stand as a constant, quiet argument between the murderer and the murdered. You can't shake the feeling of being an intruder who has stumbled upon a sacred, terrible tableau. You need a breath of air, a moment away from the inn's suffocating internal life. You carefully descend the stairs, past the ominous cellar door, and slip back out into the night. The figure outside your window from the previous night is gone, but the air still holds that chilling dampness. Your gaze is drawn to a deep, stone circle set into the ground near the back of the building. This is the dry well outside. It looks ancient, its stone lip worn smooth by centuries of rope and bucket friction. It is a gaping black eye staring up at the cold night sky. You approach the well cautiously, the dead bell forgotten momentarily in your haste. You lean over the lip, peering into the deep, absolute darkness. The silence down there is profound, a vacuum of sound. This quiet, empty cavity, you realize, is a mysterious detail that often features in the coldest, most forgotten crimes, a perfect, natural place for disposal. You reach for your phone, its flashlight cutting a thin, shaky beam into the blackness. The beam struggles against the depth, revealing only wet, moss-covered stone walls that spiral down into a chilling, absolute void. You are about to give up when the beam catches something halfway down. Not stone, not moss, but something that stands out against the gray. You retrieve a long, discarded branch and, with careful, trembling movements, manage to snag the object and pull it slowly upward. It's heavy with dampness and decay. When you finally haul it over the lip, you gasp, the cold air rushing into your lungs. It is a small, wooden, child's toy, a crude, carved pony on a rocking base. Its paint, long faded. It is the size perfect for a toddler's small hand. This is the true horror event of the well's secret, and it adds an agonizing layer to the widow's relentless sorrow. She was not just betrayed as a wife, but also as a mother. The unsent letter had mentioned the small inheritance and Silas's greed, but had contained no explicit mention of a child. This toy, damp and heavy with the darkness, is the final, undeniable proof of a lost life. Another victim of Silas's cruelty. The widow's vengeance, you realize with a sickening jolt, is not just for her. It is for this small, forgotten life. 2. You place the toy on the stone lip of the well. It is cold and heavy. You look away for a second, then look back. The little wooden pony has moved, not significantly, not violently, but just enough. When you placed it down, it was facing the inn, its tiny painted head looking toward the dark windows of room 4. Now, it has rocked infinitesimally on its base, and its head is facing the well, looking down into the black hole from which it was just retrieved. A sharp intense sentence of terror pierces your thoughts. It wants to go back. This subtle movement, a gentle passive expression of the child's enduring presence, is a far more chilling horror than any scream. The child's spirit, you realize, is bound to the deepest, darkest place Silas could consign it to. And by retrieving the toy, you have momentarily freed a spirit that doesn't want to be saved, only remembered in its dark resting place. You look back at the black pit of the well, and you hear, not with your ears, but with the cold dread in your soul, the soft, low, whispered song from the figure outside your window the night before. You realize that song was a lullaby of eternal grief, sung for this child and its wooden pony. You leave the small, damp wooden pony by the well, facing the black abyss it emerged from, a silent tribute to the child Silas murdered. The discovery adds a layer of agonizing motive to the widow's vengeance, transforming her from a wronged wife into a grieving mother. You hurry back inside, seeking refuge in the oppressive familiarity of room 4. You sit in the armchair again, the low, rhythmic scraping sound behind the widow's portrait resuming its patient. Dreadful work. You are utterly exhausted, but the inn will not allow you rest. You realize you are carrying 2 objects that tie you to the dead, the unsent letter, and the tarnished dead bell. You pick up the bell from the quilt, the metal incredibly cold, even in your warm hand. You hold it up, trying to understand the source of the soft tinkling sound it made earlier. You try to force a sound from it, shaking it gently, but it remains stubbornly silent. It only rings when the vengeance demands it. As you hold the bell, the memory of the whispered song from the previous night returns, now clearer, more insistent. It's no longer just a vague sound carried on the wind. It is ringing in your mind, a low, continuous monotone. This is the true horror event of the part you are now hearing the lullaby clearly. You close your eyes and focus, and the unintelligible sounds slowly begin to resolve themselves into fractured, mournful words. It is an old dialect, but the meaning is devastatingly clear. It is a curse and a promise. Sleep now, little stone. Sleep now, cold deep. He cannot find you here. The grave is not deep enough for a mother's fear. Silence holds the dead. No candle burns for the thief who came in the night. Every soul that rests here is a candle for your light. Rest now, little stone. Rest now, cold deep. The final line. Every soul that rests here is a candle for your light, sends a shockwave of cold dread through your body. The inn is not just haunted, it is a trap. The nameless widow is not merely seeking revenge on Silas. She is collecting new victims to serve as perpetual, flickering lights, or perhaps prisoners to illuminate the perpetual darkness of her child's burial place. The inn is a terrible, hungry monument to their shared injustice. This is the climax of terror that you have been slowly, relentlessly moving towards. The realization that you are not merely observing the haunting, but you are the intended candle for her son's eternal vigil. For a short, sharp sentence of fear pierces the silence. You are the next offering. You look at the heavy key to room 4, the withered rose etched upon its brass, and you understand the full, horrifying meaning of the inn's name. The Silent Watcher. The widow is the watcher, and the guests are the silent. Sacrificial offerings to her unrelenting sorrow. You need to move, to run. But your limbs feel heavy, cemented to the chair by this final, horrifying knowledge. You recall a small, desperate, entirely inappropriate joke. If you hear the bell now, don't blame me, I already warned you. Seriously, if you hear the bell now, you might want to consider leaving the country. As if in direct response, the tarnished dead bell in your hand emits another soft, almost loving tinkle. It's the sound of a mother confirming the name of her newest candle. You drop the bell onto the quilt, the cold dread making you feel dizzy. The whispering song fades, leaving behind only the cold, unyielding silence of a fate confirmed. The devastating realization that you are the candle for the widow's dead child has left you hollowed out, suspended between a desperate urge to flee and the chilling paralysis of final comprehension. The tarnished dead bell lies quietly on the quilt, a silent witness to the curse you just fully deciphered. The rhythmic scraping sound behind the hidden portrait continues, a constant reminder of the vigilance of the nameless mother. You move to the small, dark chest of drawers, needing to look at your own reflection to see if the dread is visible on your face, or if you still look like an innocent traveler. But there is no mirror there, only dust and old wood. You turn to the main wall where the wardrobe stands. It is a tall, narrow piece of antique furniture, its wood dark and heavy, and set into its door panel is a small, antique mirror, framed in deeply carved, blackened oak. You approach it slowly, your breath held. This is the strange, mysterious detail of the part. You stand before the mirror, and you look at your own image. You see yourself, your tired eyes, your pale face, the anxiety that has settled deep in your features. You raise your hand and bring it up to your face. You watch the reflection. Your hand moves smoothly, instantaneously. A perfect correspondence. You lower your hand. Everything is normal. But then, you try again. You raise your hand quickly. The reflected image does the same. Now, you hold it still. And as you watch, with a stomach-dropping lurch of pure terror, your reflection moves 1 second too late. Your real hand is still, but the hand in the mirror continues its upward trajectory for a microsecond. A horrifying, almost imperceptible glitch. It is not a smooth, liquid movement. It is a stutter, a delay that suggests the image is being processed by something that is either exhausted or deliberately slow. It is your own face, your own body, but there is a lag, a terrifying sense that your reflection is a separate entity, one that is slightly out of sync with your own temporal reality. This terrifying phenomenon is a true horror event that has fueled countless deep, almost incomprehensible academic debates among paranormal investigators. The debate centers on the concept of spectral displacement and reflections. No one knows why, but reflections are often considered a vulnerable point for spirits. Some theories suggest that a vengeful spirit, possessing a profound sense of injustice and a deep disconnection from the living world, can momentarily hijack the reflection to manifest a slight, chilling temporal anomaly. They argue that the widow's vengeance, which has anchored itself to the time of her death, causes the mirror, a device of perfect visual honesty, to fail, reflecting not just you, but a sliver of the inn's own trapped time. You stare, utterly motionless, at your reflection, and the lag ceases. The reflection is now perfectly aligned with you, but you know what you saw. The woman who died here was trapped outside of time, and now she is using that terrifying disconnect to toy with your own sense of reality. You have lost the feeling that you are perfectly whole. A part of you is now moving on a different timeline, a horrifying internal shift that is the beginning of the end. You hear a small, cold, silent sound in your mind, a nervous, whispered joke. If you hear the bell now, don't blame me. I guess the lag is just the local Wi-Fi. It's terrible here. The joke is thin, dissolving instantly in the face of the unblinking, slightly delayed stare of your own reflection. You take a shuddering breath, and the reflection takes its breath a fraction of a second after you do. It confirms your terrifying suspicion you are already out of sync with the world you came from. The chilling realization that your own reflection is lagging a sign of temporal displacement is the final psychological severing. You are no longer fully in the present. You are slipping into the nameless widow's endless, vengeful past. You turn sharply away from the mirror, your body tingling with nervous energy, desperate to find a focus for your mounting terror. The relentless, rhythmic scraping sound behind the portrait is a constant pull. You approach the portrait again, the cold eyes of the widow watching your every move. You push the main portrait aside, exposing the hidden, mutilated image of Silas once more, and press your ear to the wall. The scraping is coming from deeper within the stone, not from the surface, but from an internal cavity. You trace the seam of the stonework with shaking fingers, following the sound down the wall, past the level of Silas's portrait, until you find another, almost invisible break in the plaster near the base of the wall, where it meets the floor. It is cleverly hidden, masked by a large, ornate chimney breast that juts out from the wall. You push on the stonework near the chimney, and with a soft, grinding protest of old masonry, a section of the plaster and stone swings inward, revealing a cramped, narrow opening, a secret room. This is the true horror event of the part, a hidden space within the very structure of the inn, a place designed for absolute silence and secrecy. You hesitate for only a second, then plunge your phone's flashlight beam into the space. It is barely large enough to stand in, cold and impossibly damp, smelling heavily of ancient dust and a faint, acrid scent you cannot quite place. The floor is packed earth, not stone, and the walls are rough, unfinished stone blocks. And then you see the strange, mysterious detail that dominates the space. In the center of the earthen floor, there is a low, flat block of dark, unhewn stone. Upon this stone, carefully arranged in a crude circle, are several objects, a handful of dried, black petals, perhaps the withered rose, a few small, tarnished copper coins, and a piece of braided, human hair, dark and brittle. This is a crude, forgotten altar. The objects are not random debris, they are components of a ritual, a silent contract with something terrible. This is not a crime scene. This is a site of deep, enduring, spiritual focus. You realize that the intense, sickeningly sweet, metallic smell you caught earlier near the cellar door, the scent of blood and iron, is far stronger here, suggesting a sacrifice or a terrible, final commitment was made on this spot. The The air thickens with dread. It's not just cold, it's heavy, viscous, as if the very atoms of the atmosphere are struggling to move. The silence is absolute, more complete than any you have experienced in room 4. You are standing in the engine room of the widow's curse, the place where her vengeance was formally consecrated. The rhythm of the scraping ceases completely. It was leading you here. And now that you have arrived, it has fallen silent. You feel an invisible pressure pushing down on your shoulders, and you hear a soft, almost imperceptible groan emanating from the packed earth beneath the altar stone. A short, sharp sentence of fear erupts in your mind. She is here now. You are standing on hallowed ground, hallowed by betrayal and unending maternal grief. And the widow is aware of your every breath, your every trespass. You stand in the cramped, airless space of the secret room, paralyzed by the overwhelming, tangible dread emanating from the crude, forgotten altar. The absolute silence here is terrifying, signifying the heart of the curse. Your eyes are fixed on the stone block and the ritual objects, the black petals, the copper coins, and the strand of dark, brittle hair. This is where the vengeance was born. You slowly move your phone's flashlight beam around the perimeter of the tiny room, searching for some final, devastating clue. The beam plays over the rough stone walls and then settles on the corner farthest from the opening, near the packed earth floor. And there it is, tucked into the very corner, covered by a thin layer of fine dust, is a small, old wooden object. You step carefully over the altar, trying not to disturb the solemn arrangement, and reach for it. And it is a small, dust-covered wooden cradle. It's miniature, clearly handcrafted, dark with age and neglect. It's an empty vessel, but the sight of it is the most profound, true horror event yet. It confirms with agonizing finality the full extent of the widow's loss. The child whose toy you found in the well, the little stone from the whispered lullaby, was born and perished here, in the cold, unyielding silence of Silas's prison. This cradle is the physical embodiment of the injustice that fueled the curse. You kneel down, feeling the immense, crushing weight of the maternal grief contained in this tiny wooden frame. The cradle is the mysterious detail that links the tragedy to the ritual. The forgotten altar and the cradle are side by side, suggesting the widow, in her final hours, used this hidden space to perform her own terrible, desperate rites, consecrating her vengeance, using the only things she had left, the memory of her child and the artifacts of his short, doomed life. You run a finger over the smooth, cold wood of the cradle's side. It feels impossibly cold, carrying that same deep chill you felt from the vengeance's mark on the floor above. You hear a sound now, not with your ears, but deep inside your mind, a low, soft, heartbroken wail that lasts only a second, a sound that expresses all the pain of a mother denied the right to mourn. Then, the silence snaps shut again, complete and suffocating. You look at the cradle, and then your mind flashes back to the tarnished dead bell lying on the quilt upstairs. The bell with the missing clapper and the tethering string. The realization is a terrifying jolt of adrenaline. The bell's string was tied to this cradle. It was an attempt by the villagers or Silas himself to contain the spirit of the child as well as the mother, to tie the two souls together in perpetual silence. The bell on the quilt is the child's tether to this room. This sudden, sharp surge of truth is a climax in the section. You have discovered the heart of the curse, a cradle, an altar, and a double murder. A short, intense sentence of terror escapes your thoughts. They killed them both here. As you try to stand up, your knee bumps the low stone altar. A piece of the dried black petal arrangement falls from the stone and lands softly on the packed earth floor. In the intense, heavy silence, the sound of the light petal hitting the dirt is jarringly loud, a sudden, sharp noise that seems to break the spell. You quickly back out of the tiny, awful space, closing the hidden stone panel with agonizing slowness. Silas is once again hidden behind the widow, and the cradle is sealed back into its darkness. But you know the layout now. You know the engine of the vengeance, and you know exactly why you were chosen as the next candle. You have sealed the secret room and the devastating truth of the empty cradle back behind the chimney breast. Your mind is racing, a terrifying loop of images: the well, the toy, the cradle, and the altar. You stumble back toward the center of room 4, the air feeling impossibly thin. The most crucial piece of the puzzle now dominates your thoughts: the tarnished, dead bell. It lies on the quilt where you dropped it, cold and silent. You know now, with chilling certainty, that the bell is the child's tether, a final attempt to contain the spirit of the nameless baby who perished in the hidden room. The widow's vengeance is not just her own. It is the unending lament of a mother anchored to the physical silence of her lost son. You carefully pick up the bell again, its brass unnervingly cold. As your fingers close around the metal, you experience a massive, overwhelming wave of recall. This is the true horror event of the part a torrent of sensory memory that is not yours. You are overwhelmed by the feeling of frantic hands tying the black string, not around a corpse, but around the small, cold wooden cradle. You feel the immense fear of the person performing the task, perhaps Silas himself, or a terrified, complicit villager trying to prevent the child's spirit from joining its mother's rage. You see, briefly, the string running through a crack in the stone, leading up and connecting to the tiny bell, which was then hidden and secured in the floorboards of this very room. The bell was meant to be the child's silent tombstone, a promise that he would stay contained. Remember the rhythmic scraping sound that continuously came from the wall behind the portrait? You realize now that sound was the widow's rage, trying relentlessly to find and break that connection, to sever the tether and free her son's spirit so they could haunt together. This intensive recall link and sudden understanding sends a deep, agonizing chill through you. The realization that you are holding the object that defines the entire curse, and that the widow is aware of your possession, causes the sense of being watched to intensify to an unbearable degree. You feel an almost physical pressure on the back of your neck. This is the mysterious detail, a profound, physical conviction that the widow's cold gaze from the portrait is no longer static. It is active. She is looking past the painted image of Silas, past the wall, past the chimney, and down into the hidden room. She is looking at the emptiness where the cradle should be, and then back at you, holding the one object that keeps her child from true, free vengeance. A short, intense sentence of terror cuts through your mind. She wants the bell back. You clutch the bell tight, the cold metal digging into your skin. You realize that by taking this object, you have inserted yourself directly into the final, defining conflict of her curse. You are either the unwitting instrument of her son's freedom, or the next object she will use. to anchor her unending vigil. You quickly tuck the bell deep into your pocket, the heat of your body contrasting sharply with the bell's profound coldness. This is no longer a historical curiosity, it is a live wire, and you are holding the current. The dead bell, now tucked securely into your pocket, feels like a piece of frozen lead against your leg. You are holding the tether to the child's spirit, and you know the widow's gaze is fixed on you, silent and relentless. You need to know the time to measure how much of the night is left, how much longer you must endure this suffocating vigil. You scan the room for a timepiece. On the mantelpiece, above the hidden portrait of Silas, sits a very old, heavy, dark wood clock. It's an ornate pendulum clock, clearly the work of a skilled but perhaps melancholic craftsman. You look at the face of the clock, it is silent, the pendulum is motionless, suspended mid-swing. This is the mysterious detail of the part. The hands are pointing to precisely 3:07 a.m. You stare at the exact time, and a wave of chilling recognition washes over you. In almost every major collection of haunting folklore, the time between 300 a.m. and 400 a.m. is referred to as the witching hour or the devil's hour, the peak time for paranormal activity, a time when the veil between worlds is thinnest. But 3:07 a.m. is far too specific to be a coincidence. You realize this is the true horror event. The clock is not broken. It has been deliberately stopped. The hands are frozen not by mechanical failure, but by a powerful external will, forever marking the precise moment the widow or perhaps her child died. The entire inn exists outside of the normal flow of time, forever locked into the apex of its tragedy. A small, nervous, completely inappropriate, creepy joke surfaces in your mind, a desperate attempt to stay anchored to reality. If you hear the bell now, don't blame me. I guess the old girl really wanted to make sure no one forgot what time she checked out. You force a humorless breath through your teeth. You move closer to the clock. The face is dark, the glass dusty. You lean in, trying to discern why this specific minute was chosen. As you do, a second, more profound detail assaults your senses. The air, which has been consistently cold and heavy, now turns absolutely, unnaturally silent. It's not just quiet, it is the silence of complete atmospheric cancellation. Every background hum, every tiny creak of the old wood, even the faint, buzzing sound from your own phone, is gone. The stillness is so absolute it is deafening, causing a high-pitched ringing in your ears. This is the in-between time, the moment the boundary truly dissolves. You are standing in a vacuum of sound and motion at the exact time of death, holding the child's tether. You look at the portrait. The widow's eyes, though painted, seem to reflect the terrifying, deep stillness of the room. She has frozen time for you, trapping you in her final, vengeful minute. You understand with chilling certainty that until the clock moves again, you are a ghost in her world, and you will not be allowed to leave. You are an immutable part of the scene, just like the clock hands. A sharp, concise sentence of terror settles in your heart. It will not move until the vengeance is complete. The absolute silence of the inn, locked in time at 3:07 a.m., is a profound psychological weapon. You feel the cold stillness pressing in, a reflection of the widow's unending vigil. The dead bell is heavy in your pocket. and the only path forward is to understand the depth of her rage. You turn back to the centerpiece of the curse, the dual portraits. You gently swing the main portrait of the nameless widow outward, exposing the smaller, hidden image of Silas, his left eye viciously scratched out. The rhythmic scraping that used to emanate from this spot is completely gone now, replaced by the terrifying silence of the in-between time. You look closely at the back of the widow's canvas, the surface that faces the stone wall and Silas's portrait. You notice something etched into the rough, aged linen, not painted, but scratched into the material with a sharp, unforgiving object. This is the mysterious detail, a cryptic message scratched into the back of the widow's portrait. It's not letters, but a series of interconnected symbols, crude and hastily rendered, yet clearly intentional. You recognize certain elements, a crude depiction of a triangle pointing down, intersected by a circle, and a series of 3 tally marks, one slightly longer than the others, all enclosed within a jagged, imperfect diamond shape. You try to decipher the meaning, and the realization hits you this is not a personal note. It is a final, terrible formula. It is the true horror event, the ritualistic instructions, or perhaps the actual seal of the curse. This brings us to another deep, yet incomprehensible academic debate regarding occult symbols and grief. Folklorists have long argued over the efficacy and meaning of such crude, ad hoc symbols, scratched by the wronged or the dying. Were they merely expressions of final, desperate rage? Or did they tap into an older, forbidden system of malicious sympathetic magic? Scholars cannot agree on whether the downward triangle represents the spirit's forced descent. The 3 marks represent the 3 lives taken, mother, child, and Silas's future. Or if the jagged diamond represents the inn itself, consecrated as a permanent tomb. The chilling conclusion of these debates is that the intent, fueled by such profound grief and injustice, gives the symbols power, regardless of their textbook meaning. The message is clear. Even if the symbols are not, she ensured her vengeance would be permanent. You now understand that the scraping sound you heard for so long was the residual energy of the widow in her final hours, meticulously carving this terrible contract into the back of her own image. Using the portrait of her murdered husband as her silent witness, she left an anchor, a formula, and a permanent, silent observer to her revenge. You feel a profound sense of connection to her final, agonizing moments of clarity. She didn't rage wildly. She used her remaining energy for a single, terrible, and highly specific act of vengeance. A small, chilling sentence settles in your mind. Her clarity is your capture. You gently swing the widow's portrait back over the hidden formula and the mutilated face of Silas. Almush, you look at the dark, severe eyes of the woman in the frame, and you know that you are the only living soul who knows the entire terrible equation of the Inn of the Silent Watcher. And now, the execution of that formula is about to begin. You wait in the silence of 3:07 a.m., every muscle tensed, knowing that the most terrifying horror is always the one that moves slowest. The knowledge of the occult formula etched on the back of the portrait, combined with the relentless silence of the frozen time at 3:07 a.m., has rendered you utterly helpless. You are sitting on the edge of the bed, the dead bell cold in your pocket, facing the heavy, dark oak door of room 4. You realize with sickening clarity that the slow pace of this haunting is not gentle. It is the deliberate, terrifying slowness of a predator circling its prey. The entire inn is holding its breath. The silence is so perfect, so absolute, that the ringing in your ears seems deafening. You listen for the faintest sound, any reprieve from the terrifying stillness, and then you hear it. It's not a loud sound, and it doesn't come from the wall or the floor. It comes from the heavy oak door directly in front of you. A profound, sickeningly slow creaking sound begins. It is the sound of the old wood fibers protesting, the sound of the hinges turning after decades of stillness. This is the true horror event, the slow, deliberate movement of the door opening itself. It is agonizingly slow. The door moves inward barely an inch, then pauses. The terrifying silence holds for a long moment. Then the door continues, the creaking like the sound of bone scraping bone. You are frozen, unable to move, unable to shout. You watch the widening gap, your eyes fixed on the blackness of the corridor beyond. The door finally stops, resting about a foot ajar. The space is still bathed in the profound, unnatural silence. And then you see the cold figure in the doorway. It is a silhouette, tall and black, entirely filling the gap. It is not the vague, shadowy outline you saw outside the window. This is close, immediate, and utterly clear. It is the nameless widow. It is She is a figure of utter coldness. You cannot make out her features. Only the shape of a severe 18th century black dress and a high, stiff collar. Her presence radiates a profound, physical cold, a blast of frozen air that slams into you, instantly dissolving the stagnant warmth of the room. This chill is far deeper than the one you felt near the vengeance's mark. This is the cold of finality. She is motionless, standing just on the threshold, her head cocked slightly, as if listening intently to your terrified silence. This is the climax of the section, the final terrifying confrontation you knew was coming. You can't move, you can't breathe. A short, sharp sentence of terror screams in your mind. She is here for the tether. You realize that her eyes, though hidden in the deep shadow of the doorway, are fixed on the one place you tried to hide the bell, your pocket. The dragging footsteps in the hall, the shadow in the keyhole, it was all reconnaissance, leading up to this ultimate moment of reclaiming what belongs to her. A small, final, desperate joke flashes across your paralyzed thoughts. If you hear the bell now, don't blame me. You know, I really preferred the scraping sound. The silence is absolute, refusing even to carry the ghost of a laugh. The figure takes a single, slow step into the room. The silence remains absolute, yet the pressure of her presence is overwhelming. She is finally, completely, in room 4, and you are the solitary, terrified candle she has been waiting for. You look at the dark, unblinking eyes of the portrait on the wall, and they seem to be watching their physical manifestation move toward you. Satisfied at last, the figure of the nameless widow takes that single, slow step into room 4, and the cold blast of air she carries is a physical weight, pressing the breath from your lungs. She is a silent, commanding force, her dark form completely absorbing the faint light. You are pinned to the edge of the bed, a captive of her eternal 3:07 a.m. Her head remains tilted, her unseen eyes fixed on the dead bell hidden in your pocket. This is the true horror event, the final confrontation for the child's tether. You know you cannot fight her. You are not meant to be her victim. You are meant to be the final witness to her freedom, the one who brings her child's spirit back from the pit of the dry well and the hidden cradle. The bell must be returned. With a final, desperate surge of will, you manage to move. Your hand shakes violently as you plunge it into your pocket and retrieve the tarnished brass bell. It is so cold, it feels like a shard of ice. You hold it out toward the dark, motionless figure in the doorway. As the bell leaves your pocket, the widow makes her first significant movement. It is not an attack. It is a profound, subtle climax. She raises her arm, the black lace sleeve barely stirring the air, her hand reaching slowly, deliberately, for the bell. Her touch is a profound coldness that bypasses your skin and settles deep in your bones. The moment her fingers brush the metal, the dead bell emits a loud, clear, resonant clang. It is the first genuinely loud, sharp sound you have heard in the inn. A sound that breaks the spell of the absolute silence. It is the sound of a tether breaking, of a curse being fulfilled. The sound echoes, sharp and painful, through the room. And then, everything happens at once. The figure of the widow dissolves. She doesn't fade. She collapses into a cloud of profound, deep, cold air that swirls and vanishes into the floorboards near the Vengeance's mark. The old wooden clock on the mantelpiece, frozen at 3:07 a.m., gives a loud, sudden grinding sound. The pendulum swings violently, and the clock begins to tick again. Its sound aggressive and loud, marking the return of time. You realize this is your chance. The curse is momentarily spent. The vengeance is fulfilled for now. Escape and lingering is your only goal. You stumble off the bed, knocking the empty leather journal to the floor. You don't look back at the portrait, which now seems to hold only deep, empty shadow. You turn and run out of room 4, not bothering to close the door. You run down the groaning stairs, past the ominous cellar door, which is now eerily silent, and burst out into the night. You jump into your car, your hands shaking violently, and turn the key. The engine roars to life, loud and blessedly real in the cold, damp air. You throw the car into gear and drive away, leaving the silent, hulking shape of the Inn of the Silent Watcher in your rearview mirror. As you speed down the forgotten road, the clock ticking aggressively in your car confirms the time is now past 3:07 a.m. It is 3:15 a.m. You are safe. You are back in the present. The terror is over, the silence has been broken, and the clock is ticking once more. You have left the widow's inn behind you. And as the distance grows, the image of that dark, unforgiving stone building begins to fade, receding into the long, dark history it tried so desperately to hold on to. You are driving now, away from the valley, away from the silence, toward the dawn that will soon break. The fear, which was a sharp, cold spike, is softening now, becoming a dull, persistent ache in your heart. You are tired, profoundly exhausted, and the road ahead is smooth and dark, inviting you to simply release the tension and let your mind go quiet. You realize that what you experienced was not just a haunting, but a final act of witnessing. You were the medium through which the nameless mother finally broke the tether and reclaimed her child's spirit from the unjust darkness. You gave her rest, not by fighting, but by understanding. The memory of the cold, the whispered song, and the lingering injustice will remain with you, a quiet scar on your soul. But you are safe now. The cold that followed you out of the inn is receding, replaced by the natural warmth of your car and the growing promise of the morning light. You are no longer the candle for her vigil, You are the one who lit the way out. Let your hands relax on the wheel. Let your shoulders drop. The road is quiet. The engine hums a low, constant lullaby. Let the memory of the cold fade. Let the rhythm of the road carry you away from the shadows and toward the gentle, welcoming quiet of a well-earned rest. You are safe. You are done. Now, let the soft, rhythmic sound of my voice guide you far away from the inn, and quietly, deeply, into your sleep.